Okay, Commissioner Eggers, I think we're ready to get started when you are.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. Just want to take the opportunity to thank you all, first of all, for being here this morning and being a part of TampaBayWater gone virtual, I should say. And I had a couple of personal comments that we're going to have a roll call and then a couple of official comments to make. But I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank our staff for getting us ready for this morning, and obviously for continuing the important work of this organization. And the many issues that are facing our residents today, the last thing that they need to worry about, or that we need to worry about, is having issues with our basic services. So I know all of our board is extremely proud of every single one of our 150 plus employees and all of our individual city and county employees that continue to provide all of the basic,
will now be recorded.
all of the basic services and more. On that note, I wanted to thank each of you board members for being here, as I said, but also, and to your colleagues for the leadership that you all have shown throughout this time. It's really important, the roles that each of you are playing in your respective communities. So thank you. And finally, I just wanted to say thank you to our residents here in our region and beyond for their just incredible resiliency during this pandemic. I really believe, and many of us do, that they've really stepped up and for the most part have done their part to minimize the spread of this horrible disease. We've got a ways to go, so I would just say stay committed and stay vigilant and be as patient as possible. Anyway, again, thank you for your time this morning. And before we get going with an opening official statement, I wanted to go ahead and have Kathleen read the names of each board member to see who's present. Thank you.
Commissioner Eggers?
Here.
Vice Chair Oakley?
Here.
Mayor Marlowe?
Here.
Councilman Miranda?
Here.
Commissioner Merman?
Here.
Commissioner Peters?
I'm present.
Councilmember Rice?
Here.
Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Starkey?
Here.
Chairman, all are in attendance.
Okay. Thank you, Kathleen. And just again, a couple of official opening comments here that I need to make. And following the guidance to avoid large gatherings to help minimize the spread of coronavirus, this meeting is being held via the GoToMeeting telemeeting platform in accordance with the Governor's Executive Order 2069, which temporarily suspends the requirement for a quorum of the board to be physically present. Notice that the meeting will be conducted via telemeeting was posted in the Florida Administrative Register and on TampaBayWater's website. The meeting is available for viewing through the live stream on TampaBayWater's website. A recording of the meeting will be posted on the agency's website. Several options for the public comment for the meeting was advertised, including submitting in writing to be read on the record or calling in to the meeting. Participate live this morning. Public comment will take place at the beginning of the regular board meeting following our budget meeting. In addition, this meeting is being recorded and any public comments received will be entered as part of the record of the meeting record. And I would ask all of your patience and indulgence as I try my best to see who might be calling me or letting me know they want to speak. So I'll do my very best. And also, and from my vantage point, and I'm looking in that room usually that we see from our dais, I'm in that room across the way by myself looking out at the dais, and I see all of our employees that are here, and there are not many of them, trust me, but they are all very spread out on the dais themselves and all using the spacing that the CDC requires or asks of us. So with that, board members, for voting purposes today, we'll be doing a roll call vote each time there's a vote required. At the time of each vote, Kathleen will state your name and ask for your vote. And I think with that, we have one final reminder. Just keep your audio muted unless you are speaking. Brandon will have the overall mute turned on, so each of you, if you mute your own, that will help keep the background noise to a minimum. So I think that's all I have. Brandon, is there anything else that you can think? Kathleen, anything else that needs to be said that I've missed?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay, we're ready to go, and if Vice Chair Ron Oakley can lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, there'll be a flag in front of you and for all to see. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate that. And we're going to go ahead and get started with our budget workshop. And clearly the members can find the agenda item and proposed budget workshop beginning on page 5. And Christina Hackett, our Chief Financial Officer, will be doing the presentation. And again, I'll look for questions along the way and try to catch them. Thank you. Christina?
Sure. Good morning, Chairman and members of the board. This presentation will provide an overview of the key factors and important details of the proposed fiscal year 21 budget. As part of the annual budget process, the document has been submitted to staff of each member government for review, and meetings were held with each member government wanting one. The proposed fiscal year 21 budget aligns with the agency's 3 overarching responsibilities and the 5 goals of the agency's strategic plan. Some of the key factors for fiscal year 21 include a projected water demand increase of 3.9 million gallons per day for a forecasted total of 184.7 million gallons per day. Year 2 of the demand management program with fiscal year 21 funding of $3.2 million, which includes district funding of $1.4 million. Pay-as-you-go funding for the capital improvement and renewal and replacement funds, plus funding projects directly with the uniform rate in the operating budget. The proposed budget includes $4.8 million in transfers to pay-as-you-go funds and $3.4 million in the operating budget for the long-term master water project feasibility studies. This includes $1 million of district funding. Other revenue sources, such as interest income, estimated at $3.2 million, and district grants of $2.4 million, and not using any rate stabilization funds to minimize any impact on the uniform rate. So I am pleased to say the proposed fiscal year 21 budget maintains the uniform rate of 2.5590 per 1,000 gallons, making fiscal year 21 the 10th consecutive year at this uniform rate. The agency's budgeted water demand is projected each year utilizing various demand forecasting tools that consider relevant factors such as historical rainfall patterns, demographics, population growth, and conservation measures. Source scenarios are established to maximize the use of available surface water and manage groundwater resources to meet permit requirements and achieve environmental recovery. Source selection for fiscal year 21 includes 83 million gallons per day of groundwater from the 10 consolidated well fields, 28 million gallons per day of groundwater from well fields that are not part of the consolidated permit, operating the surface water treatment plant on an annual average of 64.7 million gallons per day to maximize higher river flows during wet weather months and water stored in the regional reservoir, plus running the desalination facility on an annual average of 9 million gallons per day. Annually, the agency establishes the uniform rate, which consists of 2 components, fixed and variable. The fixed cost components for each member is calculated based upon their previous year's percentage of demand times the budgeted fixed costs. Monthly, each member is billed 1/12 of their fixed cost portion. The variable cost component is calculated for each member based upon their prior month's consumption times the annual variable rate. The annual variable rate is determined by the variable cost divided by the budgeted demand. The variable rate for fiscal year 21 is 0.3848 per 1,000 gallons, which is 1.8 cents less than fiscal year's 20 variable rate. The agency's variable rate fluctuates annually according to projected demand and supply source. And in fiscal year 21, they equal 14.2% of the total costs. The remaining 85.8% of the total costs are fixed costs and are broken down into 5 subcomponents: operations, operations and maintenance agreements, pay-as-you-go funding, and debt service for member acquisition credits and for bonds. Total debt service makes up 44% of the fiscal year 21 costs. This percentage has decreased over the past few years, but it continues to be a large piece of the budget. Variable costs, which consist of chemicals and power, totals $25.9 million. Fixed costs total $156.9 million, and the breakdown of these costs are total debt service of $80.3 million for bonds and member acquisition credits, the operations and maintenance agreements for the surface water treatment plant, Keller, and the desalination facility total $14.2 million, pay-as-you-go funding to the renewal and replacement and capital improvement funds total $4.8 million, and costs for operating the agency total $57.6 million. These costs consist of $1.4 million in capital purchases for vehicles, equipment, and HVAC units, $21.6 million in professional services. This is up $5.8 million from the current fiscal year, and this is largely due to the second year of the demand management program, funding for the long-term master water plan feasibility studies, the water quality study, environmental resource permit compliance, plus the Florida Friendly Landscape Program. $22.9 million is in personnel services, which includes wages, employee insurance, FRS contributions, and continuation of the agency's merit program at a calculation of 4%. There are no new positions being requested in fiscal year 21. However, personnel services are up $3.6 million from the current fiscal year. About $2.4 million is due to GASB 68 and FRS. Annually, the state provides us with the FRS unfunded amount and our percentage of the liability we must record. The remaining amount is materials, supplies, repairs, and other services. This results in a total cost of $182.8 million. The adjustments for fiscal year 21 total $10.3 million and include surcharges, interest income, Tampa bypass canal revenue, prior year unencumbered funds, and grant income. Netting the adjustments with the total cost provides the net revenue required from water sales in fiscal year 21 of $172.5 million. Water sales are the cost to the member governments before applying any acquisition or water quality credits and is separated and billed by the fixed and variable costs. TampaBayWater's Capital Improvements Program is a 10-year plan and project portfolio that includes projects from multiple sources. It is updated annually to add new projects, update project costs and schedules, and to update the anticipated expenditures and funding needs. The fiscal year 21 through 30 plan includes 90 projects in various stages. The board approves the upcoming fiscal year's expenditures when it approves the operating budget, and also approves key stages of each project during their implementation life cycle. This chart shows a breakdown of the capital project types and shows that over 2/3 of the current projects are related to renewal and replacement and reliability. These projects are needed to renew or replace existing capital assets or infrastructure that have or will reach the end of their useful life within the 10-year planning cycle, and they are prioritized on criticality and remaining life of the assets. The remainder of the projects consist of improvements to our existing infrastructure, such as roads, buildings, safety, compliance, water quality, and new water supply feasibility studies to meet the water supply needs of the region. Over the next 10 years, the fiscal year 21 through 30 capital improvement program anticipates expenditures of $314 million. Staff is anticipating covering 44% of this, or $139.5 million, with current cash on hand, current grant awards, and pay-as-you-go funding, leaving $174.5 million of other future funding needed. $40.5 million in fiscal year 23, $109 million in fiscal year 26, and $25 million in fiscal year 29. We do anticipate some of this funding will be met with grants, and the remaining will be new debt issuance. Annually, the amount, timing, and source of funds needed is analyzed. Staff regularly connects with our financial advisors to discuss different funding strategies and scenarios that may take advantage of debt service amounts dropping in fiscal year 29 and in fiscal year 32 to try and level off impact of any debt issuance. Currently, the 10-year projection includes feasibility study costs for the long-term master water plan and water quality improvement projects. It does not include design or construction of those projects. Some of the active projects in fiscal year 21 are 2 projects at the Eldridge Wild Well Field. The first is to replace the existing overhead power lines with underground power lines. The second is to replace motors, pumps, well houses, and all electrical components. This particular project has a state appropriations grant for $750,000. Starkey Wellfield improvements to replace motors, pumps, 2 well houses, and all electrical components. The Southern Hillsborough County expansion projects, both the booster pump station design and the selection of engineering design services for the pipeline. Plus, as stated, the feasibility projects in the long-term master water plan approved by the board in December of 2018. Annually, the board is requested to approve the capital improvement program's upcoming fiscal year projected expenditures when it approves the agency's upcoming fiscal year operating budget, which we will be requesting in June. The projected capital improvement program expenditures in fiscal year 21 is $25.3 million. These funds are on hand, and this chart shows the funding sources. Additionally, board approval will be requested for each project at key stages during implementation. In June, the board will also be requested to accept the 10-year capital improvement program, allowing agency staff to plan and budget for future resources, but approving only the upcoming fiscal year's expenditures. This presents the highlights of the proposed fiscal year 21 operating budget. Anticipated demand of 184.7 million gallons a day, maintaining the full-time equivalent count at 155, total cost of $182.8 million, no use of rate stabilization funds, pay-as-you-go funding of $4.8 million, net revenue required from water sales of $172.5 million, a variable rate of 0.3848 per 1,000 gallons, and a uniform rate of 2.5590 per 1,000 gallons for the 10th consecutive year, plus the capital improvement program expenditures of $25.3 million. The next steps will be in early June when we advertise for the budget public hearing, which will be at the June 15th board meeting. During the public hearing, we will solicit any public comments on the fiscal year 21 budget and provide a brief review of the proposed budget. Subsequent to the hearing, the board will be asked to approve the fiscal year 21 operating budget plus the fiscal year 21 capital improvement program expenditures and accept the full 10-year capital improvement program. This concludes my presentation, and I would be happy to answer any questions the board may have at this time.
Thank you. Appreciate that presentation. I'm looking at the board. I don't see Councilmember Miranda. Did we lose him?
No, I'm here.
Okay. I just didn't see your picture on the screen.
No, I'm not worried about that.
Oh, you know, We'd like to see your mug, like everybody.
Well, it is a bug. Maybe why it's not on TV.
I meant that lovingly, Charlie. Sorry.
I know. I understand that. I don't take anything personal.
Yeah. Any questions of staff with the proposed budget?
I have a question, it's Commissioner Merman.
Yes.
I want to ask Christine, what percentage of the rate that is actually charged to our ratepayers is debt payment?
The total percentage of that rate is 44%. That's for both the bonds and the acquisition credits.
So, I mean, hypothetically, if somebody's water bill is $100, $44 of that goes to debt payment
Correct.
and bonds. Okay, well, I don't think I need to make a big point, but that's a big point. And we need to get our arms around that and get control of our debt. And I know we've got plans for the future by 2038, and I don't know what shape I'll be in by then. But I kind of think that what I have learned over the last probably 7 weeks is that we have almost 60,000 people in Hillsborough County without jobs, and they're not going to be able to pay a lot of their bills. And if we, I'm pretty sensitive now to the elements of, the rates and the things that we're asking our ratepayers to pay. And I'm pretty sensitive about 44%. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Is there anybody else? Yes, Commissioner. Commissioner Smith, I'm sorry.
Sorry, yes, I was just figuring out where my unmute button was. And Commissioner Merman, I agree with you completely and have discussed that with staff myself in the staff briefings and dug into a little bit more information about, how and when that debt drops off, but it's a while out. So I hear you, and I'm with you is all I want to say.
Thank you.
I guess excuse me, Councilmember Miranda, did you have something? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just want to say that I understand the financing of it, or I believe I do anyway, and not only on this, we're changing the lifestyle of America really by this virus and other things that are happening, and you can't continue to be in big debt and continue to, and I'm not talking strictly about this agency, about all governments. It's very difficult in today's time to continue giving the service that we're doing, and when you're paying interest, and the small person has to pay not interest how we pay it, they got to pay it by their credit card, and it's in the 20-some% high, and looking at those figures, and that's not us. Let me not confuse the issue. But I agree with the statements in general, what Commissioner Merman said. And, City of Tampa just did $2.9 billion in financing, but 47 of that amount is front-loaded that we're charging our own ratepayers today so that we don't have to pay taxes in the future. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember. Commissioner Oakley?
Yes, sir. We got to realize that the debt is there, and we've been paying that, but you got to be very thankful for the staff and all that they're doing to control that debt and keep it as low as it's been. I know at 44% sounds like a lot out of each dollar, but the fact of it is we wouldn't have this quality water we have and that we give to our citizens without having that debt. If there was a way to do it without debt, I'm all in. So, but the fact of it is, TampaBayWater has done a great job keeping that rate to 2.5590 for 10 years. Not many businesses actually keep their debt to that point. So and that rate they're giving out. So most of them, you know, a lot of different services have gone up on their bills and things of that nature, where we've kept ours the same for 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Oakley. Yeah, just in those lines, I was just thinking about over the last 5 years, and we've increased our staff about 10% in people, and then the large increase of professional services in the last year, or in this coming budget year, looks like the long-range plan, or the next 5 years, I should say, looks like a steady, very, very low bump in water rates. So just an overall, and then, you know, just an overall comment about the idea of trying our best to control those expenses that ultimately are as controllable as we can make them here. So just an overall comment on that, please. That would be for Christina.
I didn't quite understand the question. Would you repeat that again?
No problem. You've heard some of the comments about keeping expenses down. You've heard comments about the rates that we have and the bonding and all of that. So I was looking through the budget, and I saw usually when you increase the number of employees, you're decreasing the outsourcing of services. What we see here over the last 5 years is there's been a gradual increase of employees, and in the last year, a pretty significant increase in professional services. You've highlighted what they are. So I guess my question would be, those $21.6 million of services that we have in this year's budget, do you anticipate them in the years ahead? How do you see our employee numbers growing? All of this trying to keep our rates down because of the pressures that we have on capital. So just an overall comment about the fiscal health of Tampa Bay Water.
So in the fiscal year 21 proposed budget, we do provide a brief outlook out for 5 years. We do actually have the rate, or excuse me, the debt that's in there is what the actual debt is. For the other cost, we kind of do just a cost of inflation increase, anywhere from about 3.3 to 5% on some things. And as you can see in that, with the projected increase in demand, we are anticipating only a 1% increase over those next 5 years. However, every year when we do actually work on the budget, we look to see what our alternatives are for either having stuff done outsourced, or looking at what can be done in-house at a more cost-effective way. That is part of the budget process every year, is we ask each of the officers to look at what's being done in their divisions to see if there's something that can be done and brought in-house. Last year in fiscal year 20, we did bring in 5 people in as in-house or full-time staff, and that did provide us the ability to get some extra things done. We do have a rather healthy rate stabilization account right now of $27 million, which is something that we look at every year as well to see if we need to draw from that to help minimize the rate impact. This year we did not need to. I think as to how many full-time staff we might have in the future, I can't really say at this point. It really depends each year on what type of things are coming up, and if there's new projects or initiatives that we're faced with that we have to try and implement.
All right, let me try to be a little more specific then. Our professional services, our engineering services, and other professional services have gone up from 2016 to 2021, 44%, 231%, and 280%. Large increases. Most of it can be described, I guess, defined by the amount of work that we have on our master water supply project, our water quality project, all the engineering that's going on behind that. My question is, next year and the year after, do you see those services being cut back as the engineering is finished and the capital kicks in? Or do you think that we're going to now be at a totally different level of professional services going out? Because it is a large increase.
As far as for the master water plan feasibility studies and the water quality studies, those will be going down once they're completed. One of the things that we do look at when we are looking at both the capital improvement program and the operating budget is how much can we do through the uniform rate. So we're not issuing new debt. I don't see it increasing on purpose, but if we have the ability to fund some of our projects through the uniform rate and still be able to maintain the uniform rate, then it might be staying at the same level. But it really will depend upon what our ability is to try and do some of that pay-go with the current operating budget versus putting it out there to be for new debt issuance.
Okay. We can talk about this more later. Is there any other questions out there? Yeah, Matt Jordan.
Well, thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair and board members. And, you know, we have looked at staff and the ratio and how the work we're contracting out through consultants. And as Christina mentioned, the master water plan, these projects are quite sizable. The board has just, you know, looked at those contracts for the desal expansion, evaluation, the surface water expansion, and certainly working on the SHARP project, along with the water quality study that we're moving forward with. And, you know, we balance those each year. We've added engineering staff, and we've actually, for most of the positions that we've added, we've had a reduction in cost. Some have not been the case. We have added a couple positions that there was not a complete offset, but some offset. We're certainly mindful of that. And what I would propose is we can certainly come back and expand on this some more in June when we have our budget hearing, if that's the pleasure of the board.
Yeah, I'd just like to understand that it's a pretty big increase this year, and this year's budget that we're talking about. I would imagine some of that will drop back down, as you said, Christina, after these projects are designed up. But those are the kinds of things that continue putting pressure on our rates. And I just wanted to, in the comment that was made, several of the comments that were made about keeping our costs down, I just think that's something that we have to look at. So I look forward to hearing more about that in June.
And Mr. Chair, if I could just make another comment, all these capital projects that we have coming up, I'd like to see an analysis of those, of how it will increase our efficiencies. Will it save the ratepayers down the road? For instance, I know I've been a strong proponent of reclaimed water because I think it would save in the long term, maybe because of what's going on with the COVID-19, that we might have a fresher look at that, because it would help save in many instances for the ratepayers. But I would like to kind of scrutinize all these capital projects to make sure, number one, that they're absolutely necessary and that we can really deliver efficiencies back to the ratepayers.
Thank you, Commissioner Merman. Anybody else? There's no action needed on this item today. I just want to make sure no other comments or questions, and I don't see any, so we can move technically out of the budget workshop. And before we get into the regular part of our meeting, we have an opportunity for public comments. We're going to obviously, members of the public were invited to comment through writing by emailing our records department. Any written comments received will be read into the record. Members of the public also obtained the call-in number through our records department and call in today's meeting. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to speak. As of 4/17/2020, we have not received any requests to make public comment. Brandon, is there anybody online or here at the facility?
Mr. Chair, I don't have anybody on.
Mr. Starkey wants to speak for a second.
Hold on, Commissioner Stark. Hold on.
Okay.
So I just finishing, and nobody here no public comments?
No, I don't see anybody online, sir. I do see one caller 14, but that's unidentified. So is there anyone on the line who would like to speak under public comment?
I think that caller is could be one of my constituents.
It sounds like there's no public comment, sir.
Okay, so before we start with the regular meeting, Commissioner Stark, did you have a comment?
Well, I just wanted to say, as some of you who know me well know that I'm a big proponent of, one, trails, and two, being able to take property that's owned by the public and have more public access to it. When I was on the Swift Mud Board, this was a big priority of mine, and I think it's been good to see how Swift Mud opened up their land for more recreation. And I had mentioned, Commissioner Merman, especially you might recall, that we should look to seeing how we could take that water line that we're putting in Hillsborough County down to Lithia, and wherever possible, make it more of an amenity than maybe, something that may just be, I won't say an eyesore, because our easements and lines aren't eyesores, but I just like always trying to look for more public opportunity to enjoy the property that they own. So it's not in our budget now, and I think it's something that we should discuss more and have staff look at. But I had my first initial meeting here in Pasco County with some of our staff about going to Swift Mud and to TampaBayWater and others, and just seeing wherever there is public property where we may be able to have more public use of it in a safe recreational mode. I think we should be looking at it. And I just wanted to just throw that out there to the board. Great idea.
Yeah, I think included in our budget that we just discussed is our strategic plan, and probably that's a great place for us to have maybe insert a piece or amend our plan to incorporate that a little bit more. If I didn't read the whole plan again coming into this meeting, but I think it's a good idea. Anytime we have that opportunity, and maybe just a cultural switch for people to kind of look through that lens as they're putting a project together, or just looking at our lands in review, what we have now, what do we have, what kind of things. So I think it's a good idea.
I think anytime the public sees they're getting more bang for their dollar, they're happier to invest. And talking with staff in preparation for this meeting, some of the things we talked about was that in the purchase of the land for the line to Lithia, a lot of it will just be easement, but I would want to enter into the idea that as we're negotiating, it's factual that if you have a trail near your property, your values go up, whether it's commercial, retail or residential. And so I think that we should be talking to the owners if we're doing easements and not purchases, getting that permission to have a trail on top of the easement is to everyone's benefit. Maybe we'll make the negotiations go even smoother.
Yeah, I think that's all relative to cost and relative to getting permission. So again, the idea of trying to keep our costs down, those drive costs a little bit, but in the big scheme of things, may be well worth it. So Matt, I see you had your hand up. Matt Jordan.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Commissioner Starkey, yes, we've had some discussions, and certainly trails are a good thing, and there's times where we can accommodate those. This could be something, when you talk about the strategic plan and the board direction, this could be a good topic for one of the board workshops is what I would suggest.
Yes, and I would agree, and I sounds like we have others that would agree that we could add this to that agenda one day.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
We've gone past our workshop in this April. Of course, we're not going to do that, so we'll look for another one. I know we'll be trying probably in that July-August time frame. Anybody else before we get started with the consent agenda? Okay, well, now we have a consent agenda which includes a couple of things under General Manager, General Counsel, Water Production, Science and Technical, Finance. A lot of different items in there embedded, some really good information for our board members and for the residents. Is there anybody that would like to pull any of the items from the agenda. Otherwise, I need a motion for approval of the consent.
Mr. Chairman,
This is Commissioner Starkey. I move for approval. I'll second.
I
I'd like to just ask,
I think you have
Was
to
it-
say your name in this kind of format.
I didn't see who said
Miranda.
that. Who
Commissioner
said
Merman.
that? Okay, sorry, Commissioner Merman. Councilmember Miranda, go ahead.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I'm not wanting to pull anything. I just want to say that going forward, I believe we ought to trust but verify, especially on contracts that we've had for a long period. Bring it up in the next, I know we're tight for time today, and I don't want to stop any progress that we're making, so I'll bring it up at a later meeting. But I just want to say on D1, I want to make some recommendations in the future when we have another general meeting. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm sure that we continue, or at least I assume and hope that we continue to get multiple bids on these projects, but look forward to that conversation later, Councilmember Miranda.
Thank you, Mr.
So we had a motion and a second, and you need a roll call, please.
Mayor Marlowe,
Aye.
Councilman Miranda,
Yes.
Commissioner Merman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Oakley,
Aye.
Commissioner Peters,
Yes.
Councilmember Rice,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Starkey.
Yes.
Chairman Eggers.
Yes, and that motion carries unanimously. I really, I don't know if anybody had I'm sure everybody had a chance to take a look at the dashboard that was presented, and I think that would be a nice, I think it belongs on the consent, but I think maybe at the June meeting, if we get a chance, maybe we can pull that just to kind of go through. I think it's pretty loaded with a lot of good information that it hits at 20,000 feet, so to speak, and I know a few questions just popped into my mind as I was looking through that, but maybe we could take just a minute or two under your regular agenda to discuss the dashboard again, just to kind of refresh our minds on what's on there and what it took to put together. But I thought there was some really good information in there.
Yes, sir, we'll do that.
Okay. All right, we're moving on to the regular agenda, and Matt Jordan, General Manager, you have a couple of things to address, please.
Yes, and again, good morning, Mr. Chair and board members. And if you would, I'm covering item G1 on the agenda. And I'd start off with the update on the COVID-19 that we've been dealing with, all of us throughout the region and certainly the country. And talk about the TampaBayWater has updated and implemented our infectious disease response plan and the Water Emergency Incident Command System. In addition to that, we have banned all non-essential travel, implemented a temporary telework policy, and we have have 71 employees, or about 46% of our workforce, working from home. I've extended that to April 30th to coincide with the governor's directive. We have also tried to isolate operations and laboratory staff. We have some staff on 12-hour shifts to limit employee interaction. We've implemented the new Emergency Sick Leave and Emergency Family Medical Leave Act, and with the passage of the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. We've certainly inventoried all of our chemicals to ensure that we have enough supplies to continue regular operations. We prepared a water fact sheet to discuss the coronavirus and put that on our website. We continue to communicate with member government utility directors. We've shared our business continuity plans, our infectious disease response plan, and we had a conference call to coordinate with all your utility directors on April 2nd. We certainly also ensured that our contractors that run the surface water and the desalination plant, Veolia and American Water, that they have implemented their infectious disease plans so they can ensure continuity of operations as well. And I would certainly like to thank all the TampaBayWater staff for working through these things, updating policies, continuing the business, whether working from home or coming into the workplace. And certainly appreciate that, and I appreciate the board accommodating us on this virtual meeting. And the next item I plan to cover under G1 is the operations and demands, water demands. And with your permission, Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask Chuck Carden to provide that update.
Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. This is a brief presentation on the current regional water demand and how we are operating the system currently. No action is being requested today. Overall operation of the system is doing very well. However, demands have been increasing steadily as we approach the driest part of our water year. The table shows average delivery this year compared to the same period over the last 4-year average, October through April 15th, by each member government. This year's increased demands began to become magnified starting in mid-March. We believe it is a combination of new water use and weather. Most of this is due to the outdoor irrigation. Overall, there is a 13.29 million gallon a day increase in the region, or about 7.8%. St. Pete is showing a 1.9 million gallon a day decrease, and Pinellas and Newport Richey have been relatively flat. Tampa has purchased about 3.1 million gallons of water this year from January through early February. They are currently not purchasing water, but that may change very soon. The remaining increase is coming from Pasco and Hillsborough counties, where they are experiencing the majority of the region's growth. Since March 15th, daily averages have been running about 20 to 26 million gallons a day, more than the same time last year. In terms of weather, rainfall for the 6-month period, October through March, we've had a lot of rain in October, but the totals have started dropping off starting in January. The total rainfall received this year is 15.59 inches, and the average for this period is 16.8 inches. Good news, the regional system is working the way it was intended, and we have plenty of supply to meet the increased demands. Our current usage of sources are as following. Surface water treatment plant is running at 70 million gallons a day using water from the reservoir. The regional reservoir is holding approximately 11.5 billion gallons of water, and when full, it can hold up to 15.5 billion gallons. The consolidated water use permit is at 84.3 million gallons, well below the 90 million gallon a day 12-month running average. The South Central Regional well fields is at 23.3 million gallons, and the permit limit is 24.1 annual average. The Tampa Bay Seawater Desal plant is running at 20 million gallons a day and will continue running through early July. We are in good shape this year to weather these dry conditions, but we'll continue to monitor the demands and rainfall totals to ensure that we will be able to rely on the reservoir for use next year. We need to fill it up this summer. To encourage everyone staying at home to practice wise water use and to curb outdoor water use, the agency has increased our conservation messaging on social media. There are on those slides some examples of what we've been posting. And Mr. Chairman, this concludes my remarks, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I had a question real quick, on you had met with the utility directors and found overall that, I guess the sewer plants aren't at elevated states, implying that a lot of our increase in water consumption has been because of irrigation. Just a comment on that, if you would, as it relates to the overall system. Thank you.
Yes, we did meet with the utility directors, keeping our eye on these demands. Several of them mentioned at the on the call that the wastewater demands in their systems have not been going up. So putting it on staying at home and everybody's using more water, there's probably some of that, but most of this is for outdoor irrigation. Maybe people are home and they're watering more. That's why we're putting on that messaging. Just a reminder, stay within your limits, your restrictions, and water on your days. Do not go above that, and that was our message.
I have a question.
Yeah, Commissioner Merman.
Okay, Chuck. So we have just put in water restrictions in Hillsborough County, mainly because our water consumption has really gone through the roof. I think last month it was wasn't it close to 90 million gallons a day, something like that. Anyway, so I think we need to really step up our game on this water conservation. And in Hillsborough County, that has a lot of growth, they're putting in new landscaping, with the new house. And so I think what we've got to do is get a message out to these builders and see how we can more directly, enforce maybe some xeriscaping type, any type of conservation landscaping that might be available to them. So I wondered if that is possible for us to really, really move in a stronger way to get the conservation and the xeriscaping and more efficient landscaping message to the builders, but also to the homeowners, especially in South County, in Hillsborough County.
Yes, ma'am. And just recently, the WaterWise program has been rolled out, the marketing, the initial stages. Part of that is focusing on the developers, that program. That's just getting started.
Mm-hmm. Well, the developers are one thing. It's the builders that actually
And the builders.
kind of get more involved. Yeah, so you're talking about developers and builders?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. But we need to do it now. We're really kind of in a drought season right now. Hopefully we're going to start getting some rain. But I hope that we're being more aggressive.
Yes, ma'am. I would mention that we are having another utility director call on Friday, and some of them have been talking about starting, move this up a little bit, the WaterWise program, get it rolling a little bit. We've been slowed down by the COVID-19, but maybe we'll have that as a main focus of our talk on Friday.
Well, during COVID-19, we also were experiencing major drought. So maybe that would have been something positive we could have been working on while we were forcing people to stay in their homes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Anybody? Anything else, Chuck?
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, Commissioner Smith. Yes.
Thank you. And I had discussed with Chuck that although this report says that we are handling the demands right now, I certainly has been very dry, and so it might be whatever we can do to conserve water even a little into the typical rainy season might help fill up the reservoir. I know he touched on that in his remarks, but I just want to highlight that if we can fill up the reservoir in the rainy season and delay whatever we can do to delay demands on that, we'll be in a better position going into the next dry season, which I believe is usually like October or the fall, whatever. So I just want to highlight that and ask Chuck if Mr. Cardin if I've got that right, or if he wants to add to that.
Yes, ma'am. And what I refer to is our cycle. We use the reservoir during the spring dry season. It goes down to a level generally 6 to 8 billion gallons. And then we get the rains in July and we fill it up by October 1. We're back at 15.5 billion gallons. And we always want to start with the reservoir full at the beginning of the water year. If we do not get those rains or we have a prolonged drought, the water year would start with a lower reservoir, which could get us into trouble the same period of time next year if we don't have the water in the reservoir.
Thank you.
Yeah, anybody else? I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, I think, we've talked about several things today already about our long-term bond rates that we've committed to years ago, and those are coming up. The amount of money that we're spending on our member government's assets, that's coming due the end of this decade, and then the other bonds are coming due at the end. So we're in the middle of paying those bonds off, and so there's not, again, to the comment earlier about trying to watch our expenses on that front, I think it's about new capital projects. This discussion about what to do with our landscaping, I guess, is really, it falls on us to make sure that folks out there are doing their best to conserve during this time, and I think augment. I know we have that program that we're starting, was mentioned, but a lot of our regional governments, and that means all of us sitting here, not just you or me, all of us, have to remember that as part of our requirements as these builders and developers move forward in the landscaping, whether they're required to use xeriscaping or more reclaimed or whatever. So again, this all plays together, and being able to react on the spot to change that is difficult in a short-term basis. So I just think we have to be careful, except the part that was mentioned about talking to our utility directors and therefore getting the messaging out to our residents. We can do that, and I think I agree, we need to ramp that up. Anybody else would like to comment? Okay. We'll get back to Matt. What else do you have for us this morning?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a few more items. And I was wondering if I could ask Mr. Warren Hogg, our Permits and Compliance Manager, to talk a little bit about the work we're doing, or the coordination that the district works with the member governments on conservation and what their plans are for any conservation efforts. Could you give us an update, Warren?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair, board members. This is Warren Hogg. I've been informed by the Water Management District staff that they will take an item to their governing board next Tuesday to enact Phase 1 watering restrictions throughout the Tampa Bay region and south. And that's due to the diminished rainfall and diminished stream flow both in our area and south of us. Now, Phase 1 restrictions are basically getting ready for something that could be coming. It's increased messaging, as we and you are starting to do. The district will continue their messaging and up that. We have not yet seen the details of what will be in their shortage order, but we can share that with you following next Tuesday's board meeting. Additional or watering restrictions beyond the year-round restrictions would generally not kick in until a Phase 2, which would be limiting the hours of watering. But this is a beginning step, realizing the dry conditions that we're in.
Thank you, Warren. If I may, Mr. Chair, I have a couple more items to discuss.
Go ahead.
Thank you. As we've noticed, the board workshops that were previously scheduled have been canceled. We're currently working with looking for some dates between June and August. We will send out an agenda several weeks prior to any workshop. The long-term master water plan feasibility studies continue with the surface water and desal expansion evaluation, along with the SHARP project. As part of the feasibility studies on the 2 expansion of the water treatment plants, we will include an analysis of the current operating contracts before those are coming up for renewal in about 2024. South Central Hillsborough County, the booster station and pipeline, that work continues moving forward. That's also going to be discussed under item L1 coming up in a few minutes regarding the design and permitting of the booster station. We did secure the property that the board approved for the booster station, and we closed on it this past Monday. And staff is continuing to work with Hillsborough County on the discussions of the pipeline to South Central. And finally, Under water quality evaluation, there was an update on the consent agenda, item D8, and we will be bringing a contract, and continue to work with your member government. We'll be bringing a contract to the board in August of this year. And that's all I have, Mr. Chair, unless there are questions.
Any questions for Matt? Anybody? Okay. Next up on the agenda is a legislative session report. And Pete Dunbar and Matt Blair, I heard you on the line earlier. Are you there and available for any updates?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. We're ready to go, and we'll do this as briefly as we can. Good morning, board members. There was a updated report that went out with your agenda materials, and I will basically tell you there have been no changes in status on any of the legislation that is discussed there. We find ourselves in a bit of a unique experience in that the governor, because of the virus priorities, has requested that the legislature not deliver legislation to him. And so with 7 small exceptions, all of the legislation from the legislative session, just under 200 bills, is still pending delivery. Among them is the one major bill that we were monitoring and is discussed in your report that deals with water quality improvement. This is the one that deals with study for bottled water impact, the water quality monitoring programs, and the mandate for DEP to begin rulemaking on potable reuse. One of the other items, and I'm going to turn it over to Matt here in just a minute, that is still being held is the budget, and we, I think, likely expect that that's going to be revisited before the budget year begins on July the 1st based on revenue projections that will be discussed in May. And Matt Blair, if you would, why don't you talk a little bit about the budget and where you think we're going?
Sounds good. Thank you. This is Matthew Blair. To give you just a quick update, the Cypress Bridge Wellfield Improvement Project was funded and is part of the budget currently that, as Pete mentioned, is being held by the legislature until the governor asks for it. That funding is at $250,000. It's on line 1635A. For those that want to look, it's on page 249, and it's part of $76.5 million worth of water project funding that was included in the budget. Where we find ourselves today on the budget process is that there's a lot of mixed messaging going along with the virus and its impact to the budget. Originally, 3-4 weeks ago, we were hearing that the legislature could come back. They could open the current year budget that we're in and need to make modifications to that because of the loss of revenue from sales tax collection and the increased cost. And I'll just let you remember that the state has about $2.5 billion in reserves currently, cash reserves, that was available. About 2 weeks ago, we were told they weren't going to need to open the current year budget, that the federal stimulus package includes about $9 billion for Florida. I think as of last week, about half of that's been delivered to the state, and the state felt confident that they wouldn't need to reopen the current year budget, but again, feel strongly that they'll need to address the coming year budget, of which our funding is a part. Last week, we were told by legislative leadership that they may not do that prior to July 1st, that they may do that in late July or early August, convening for a special session to address the budget. And on Friday, the governor opined that he may be able to deal with the shortfall perhaps by simply vetoing a major amount of the projects in the existing budget, and that with a number of vetoes might be able to achieve what would need to be achieved for the state's portion as it relates to the budget. I don't think many folks think that that's, I think many folks have differing opinions on that, but that was the governor's opinion late last week. So I give you all of that to say for Pete and I, it's very difficult to hypothesize exactly where things are and where things land with this budget. Certainly we agree the budget will be
opened back up and addressed, it's unlikely that vetoes or other things would be sufficient to prevent the legislature from needing to reopen the budget and address it fairly dramatically as a result of the virus.
And Mr. Chairman, unless there are questions, that's, I think, an update on where we are legislatively.
Are there any questions from the board? I don't hear or see any, so thank you both for the update, and keep your hand on the pulse. I mean, I know it's going to be changing weekly over the next few, probably couple, 3 months. So look forward to your future reports.
Sure.
I see nothing from General Counsel on the regular agenda. And we'll move into the water production part of our meeting. I know that we have a couple of items there, Matt.
Yes, sir. Item I-1 is the Southern Hillsborough County Booster Station, and Mr. Carden is going to present this item.
Yes.
Okay.
As approved by the board at its June 2019 meeting, TampaBayWater is increasing the delivery of regional water supplies to Hillsborough County's Lithia Water Treatment Plant. An engineering study evaluated the existing system capacity and provided criteria for a new booster station. A procurement process was conducted for professional services for the pump station late in 2019, and at the February 2020 meeting, the board approved a ranking of 7 firms and authorized staff to negotiate a contract scope and fee starting with the top-ranked firm. Staff has successfully negotiated a scope of services fee for a contract for the design, public outreach, permitting, construction inspection, and startup assistance services for the project with the top-ranked firm of Reese Engineering Incorporated. Agenda item I-1 is a recommendation for approval of a contract with Reese Engineering in the amount of $1,842,493, including a $200,000 owner allowance. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I'll move approval of Commissioner Merman. Second.
Do I have a second?
Second, Commissioner Smith.
Are there any questions on this item? Okay, roll call, please.
I have a question, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Commissioner Smith.
And I just want to try to understand how helpful this will be to alleviating the water pressure problems we're having in South Hillsborough County. Will this fix it? Will this partly fix it? How helpful will this booster station be?
I'll ask John Kennedy, our Senior Manager of Engineering Services, to answer that.
Morning, board members. This is Jonathan Kennedy with TampaBayWater. This project allows us to put additional flows between 5 and 7 million gallons a day into Hillsborough's Lithia Water Treatment Plant. Our information is that the county staff is also pursuing a booster station downstream of the Lithia Water Treatment Plant, which, working in combination with ours, should alleviate some of the pressure problems that county staff has been reporting.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Remember, everybody, mute your phone if you're not speaking. Anybody else with a question on that? Okay, we'll do the roll call, please.
Mayor Marlowe?
Aye.
Councilman Miranda?
Yes.
Commissioner Merman?
Yes.
Vice Chair Oakley?
Aye.
Commissioner Peters?
Yes.
Councilmember Rice?
Yes.
Commissioner Smith?
Yes.
Commissioner Starkey?
Yes.
Chairman Eggers?
Yes, and that motion carries unanimously. Thank you, appreciate that. And now we'll move on to I-2, which is our on-call civil contractor services contract. Matt?
Yes, sir, and Mr. Carden will also present this item.
Thank you. In August of 2017, the board awarded an on-call civil contractor services contract to Granger Maintenance and Construction. The contract amount awarded was $1 million over a 4-year contract term. The contract is used for tasks that are beyond the scope of what TampaBayWater maintenance staff can perform and or either time-sensitive or too small to cost-effectively execute using a standard design bid process. Although some of the tasks are planned for in the capital improvement program, most of the use of this contract is for unplanned repairs. Examples of some of the tasks assigned over the past 2.5 years include corrosion system repairs, road repairs, installation repairs in the laboratory, reservoir compliance repair work, and stormwater pond erosion control, to name a few. Currently, the maximum contract amount is nearing the upper limit. The requested $500,000 contract increase will allow for the release of a pending task to replace chemical piping at the Keller Hydrogen Sulfide facility. It will also allow for the remainder of fiscal year 2020 reservoir support to be performed by Granger, who is already familiar with the work. The remaining amounts of the Granger contract space will be used to carry through the remainder of the contract ending September of 2021. TampaBayWater is recommending approval of Amendment 1 to Contract 2018-003 for on-call civil contractor services. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Chuck?
Move approval. Commissioner Merman. Second, Commissioner Starkey.
Councilmember Miranda, did you have a question?
No, I was seconding it. It's all right, no problem.
Okay. You got in there on the second. I just wanted to make sure you didn't have a question.
Not at all.
Any other questions? Roll call, please.
Mayor Marlowe,
Aye.
Councilmember Miranda,
Yes.
Commissioner Merman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Oakley,
Aye.
Commissioner Peters,
Yes.
Councilmember Rice,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Oh, yes.
Commissioner Starkey,
Aye.
Chairman Eggers.
Aye, and that motion carries unanimously. Thank you. We'll move on to the science and technical part. First item is test well site access and utility easements for a new well field via Sharp credits. Chuck, excuse me. Sorry about that. That would go straight to Warren Hogg. Apologize.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Item J1 requests delegation of authority to the general manager to acquire a test well site and connecting utility and access easements. The new well field via Sharp Credits project requires purchase of land so we can construct an aquifer performance test well and monitor wells. The board approved the scope for completion of this aquifer performance test at the October 19 meeting. In December of 18, the board approved the long-term master water plan update. This plan identified 3 projects that have been recommended for further study. This presentation is related to the new well field via Sharp Credits feasibility project. The feasibility project includes design and construction of a test production well and monitor wells, an aquifer performance test, well field modeling and water use permit application, and the design of the collector main layout and water quality treatment facilities. The feasibility project also includes finalized negotiations with Hillsborough County for aquifer recharge credits. All of this information will enable us to determine the cost and capacity of the new well field and compare it with the other 2 feasibility projects. In October of 19, the board approved the initial task, but today we're requesting only approval of the property acquisition task. There are future items that will come before the board, include the bid award for a test well construction and professional services contract to complete the feasibility work and preliminary conceptual design of the well and water treatment plant. Staff has identified several potential properties within the search area that we identified in the prior modeling studies. Our focus search area is currently undergoing rapid residential development, and much of the remaining land is dedicated to agriculture or preservation. The proposed test well site is owned by the Hillsborough County Environmental Lands Acquisition and Protection Program, or ELAP. but the western 4 acres of the larger tract are not restricted to preservation use, and the county ELAP staff have expressed interest in selling it. The proposed test well site does not have direct access to a public right-of-way, therefore an access easement is needed along the west side of the property. The access parcel is the amenity area for a new residential subdivision. While the residential subdivision is almost complete, the developer still controls the community development district, and he has expressed a willingness to grant the easements along this amenity area. This slide shows the proposed test well site outlined in green. The preserve owned by ELAP is to the east, and the utility and access easements are shown in blue going to the west through the amenity parcel. Staff today recommends that the board delegate authority to the general manager to negotiate the purchase of a parcel of land owned by Hillsborough County ELAP and to enter into a written purchase agreement for appraised value not to exceed $225,000, inclusive of all due diligence expenses and closing costs. Also, to delegate authority to the general manager to negotiate and execute the 2 easements needed from the adjoining property owner at a cost not to exceed $60,000, all inclusive. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions for Warren? Yes, Commissioner Smith.
Yes, I just want to clarify. I've discussed this with ELAP staff as well as TampaBayWater staff and confirmed that this, when our environmental lands program purchases land for preservation, we sometimes, in order to make the real estate deal work, we are in a position where we have to buy some extra land that is not really suitable for environmental preservation. But we go ahead and do that to make the deal, but we designate the part upon acquisition. Like, it can't be designated later. When we buy the property, we designate that land as an acquisition of convenience, meaning we never plan to preserve that part. We just had to buy it when we bought the preservation part. And this land is designated an acquisition of convenience for that reason. So it's not like we are considering putting TampaBayWater facilities on land that was purchased for preservation. This was purchased all along and designated as an acquisition of convenience. Now, because of COVID, this current proposal we're considering has not yet been through the final ELAP vetting stage of going through the citizen advisory group. So with the understanding that that step still has to be made in order to approve the deal from their end, I just wanted to explain the whole background of this and why I'd be comfortable with moving forward with this deal, and I'll move approval.
I'll second, Mr. Merman.
Thank you. Thank you both. Any other questions or comments? Okay, roll call, please.
Mayor Marlowe,
Aye.
Councilman Miranda, Commissioner Merman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Oakley,
Aye.
Commissioner Peters,
Yes.
Councilmember Rice,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Starkey,
Yes.
Chairman Eggers.
Aye, and that motion carries unanimously. Thank you. We'll move on to J2, which is a consolidated water use permit update. And again, we're going back to Warren on that. Thank you.
Good morning again. If you recall, at the February board meeting, I presented an overview of the upcoming renewal of our consolidated water use permit. This morning, I'd like to continue that discussion, but focus on one specific concept of the permit renewal, and that is to incorporate our water shortage mitigation plan into the renewed permit. This is a concept that we've discussed with your staffs both individually and as a group. The water shortage mitigation plan helps us manage our supply sources during drought events. The water supply strategies in the plan maximize the use of our multiple supply sources. As we go into this increasing levels of a drought, our wellfield production will continue to be directed through the optimized regional operations plan to minimize any environmental effects. And this is the latest update to the plan that was approved by the board in April of 2017. As I mentioned, as the region progresses through a drought event, we will track rainfall and river flow deficits and the quantity of water available in our regional reservoir. These are the factors or quantitative triggers that cause us to move through the water shortage stages in our plan from a stage 1 drought alert to a stage 4 water supply crisis. Demand management is accomplished by the members and the Water Management District with TampaBayWater's regional support. We implement the water supply measures specific to each water shortage stage. That's TampaBayWater's role. Our shortage plan lists the priority order of our supply sources as we move through the stages of a drought. Once we get into the mid and late stages, we are maximizing the use of our desalination facility. We will have temporarily increased our withdrawal from the Alafaya River. There's additional augmentation of the Hillsborough River Reservoir from the Bypass Canal Middle Pool. There's additional regional supply from the Bypass Canal Lower Pool, and that's used to sustain our surface water treatment plant for as much and as long as possible. Finally, our option would be temporary additional groundwater from the consolidated permit well fields. That's above the annual average of 90 million gallons per day. This is the supply option of last resort for the most severe drought conditions when the other supply sources have been fully used or depleted. And this final action would only be implemented to avoid a public health and safety emergency in the member government service areas. The concept we would like to discuss with the district is to incorporate the water shortage mitigation plan into the renewed consolidated permit by reference. By doing this, we would not need to request an emergency order from the district to exceed the 90 MGD annual average limit. This approval would be given with the issuance of the permit. We would commit to monitor and assess environmental data following a severe drought event and determine if our pumping higher than 90 million gallons a day has caused any adverse environmental impact. By incorporating this plan in the renewed permit, we would commit to directly restore or mitigate these adverse impacts, and the district would review and approve our evaluation and mitigation proposal. This commitment to mitigate any adverse impact would be in lieu of a monetary penalty from the Water Management District. There's several benefits to incorporating the plan into the renewed consolidated permit. Those are, by issuing the permit, including the plan, the district will be acknowledging in advance that if we enter into a severe drought condition, temporary additional groundwater above the permit limit may be needed to avoid a public health and safety emergency. We would avoid any potential delay in obtaining an emergency order, since this would be granted by issuance of the permit. The district would be agreeing to not issue a monetary fine or penalty to us for pumping higher than 90 million gallons a day, but in return, we'll be committing to use our funds to directly restore any environmental systems adversely impacted by our additional groundwater pumping. Being able to rely on this flexibility allows us to fully utilize our existing supply sources and avoid building new water supply infrastructure that would only be needed during times of severe drought. New supply that's needed to meet normal demand growth will come through implementation of the Master Water Plan. But not building the emergency supply capacity gives us additional financial stability, and avoiding the potential of a permit exceedance should help us maintain our strong bond rating. We've discussed this with the member government staffs, but we've not yet discussed this with the Water Management District in this current permit renewal cycle. We wanted to bring this concept to you for feedback and direction before proceeding further with the district. If the board concurs with our proposal, we would schedule a pre-application meeting with the district and the members to discuss how or if this can be implemented. So we're not looking for any approval of this concept today, but just we're looking for your feedback that it's a valid concept for us to pursue, to discuss with the district and the member staffs to see if this could be done, and if so, what would that look like? If we are able to work with the district and the members to come up with a concept and some draft permit language, we could bring that back to the board in August of this year so that you fully see the details of what we're proposing. And any draft permit conditions would be in our permit renewal package that we'll bring to you for review and approval in October of this year. So this is simply a step for us to go to the district to explore the concept. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Warren. I think it's a great idea, but I open it up to the board for any questions. Commissioner Merman.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Warren. Another thing I've learned going through this crisis is that government bureaucracy can tend to be a little bit of a headache in getting people the help they need. In this case, it would be the water. So what we're talking about, this sounds like a lot of bureaucracy to me, that we have to apply to SwiftMud to get access to more water. Am I not reading this right, or can you bottom line it for me exactly what it means? Because I got to tell you that, you know, like, and I have been in touch with our utility director a lot this last month, because I know the low flow situation is starting to come around. But I certainly don't want my constituents to have to wait, just like they're waiting for unemployment claims right now because of having to go through a huge you know, requests and then approvals, and I notice we're bringing it up again in October when we're supposed to be in another drought. So can you give me a bottom line of what this really is and what it means?
Yes, Commissioner. What this would do for us is to streamline the process. The water shortage mitigation plan is our commitment that we will meet your demands 24/7. We will be committing to the district in advance. This is how we'll commit to operate during a drought to meet demands and protect the environment. But it would remove that piece of bureaucracy for us at the end, that if we must have additional water, we don't need to go to the district at that moment and get an emergency order. That would be granted in the permit as long as we've operated the way we committed to operate. So it would actually remove a potential delay for us, and that if that occurs.
Okay, so I get that. Okay, we're in a drought, and say Hillsborough County is noticing that we're using a whole lot of water because we're in a drought. So do they request from you for more water, or how does that work?
Each of the members work with us on the coming demands, both long-term and short-term or immediate. We know what you're experiencing, so we're stepping up our actions and our delivery to make sure we meet your demands. What I did not discuss in parallel to this is just, our plan is just the water supply side of it. The district and the members will be going through increasing phases of water shortage restrictions to get the public to be fully aware to use less water as we go. into a drought. So the two of them together should help us avoid this emergency situation. But we are committed to meet your demands 24/7. This, we think, is a way to remove a potential delay for us and to give us some additional benefits and provide the district some provisional assurances.
Okay, thank you very much for the explanation. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Merman. Anybody else? Yes, Councilmember Rice.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is an intriguing idea, and I'm certainly looking forward to hearing more of the details in August. I just think that one of the things that we need to be cautious of and how we communicate this to the public is that the consolidated well permit, that's very important. And, part of the creation of Tampa Bay Water was to end the overpumping of those well fields. So I think we just need to be really clear in communicating to the public that this is about good planning, and this is a way to help us be more nimble during a drought time situation. But overall, I think we're heading in the right direction, and I'm looking forward to hearing more of the details. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Rice. Anybody else?
Yes, Commissioner Starkey, I would agree with Board Member Rice. I think, and Commissioner Merman, I think anytime we streamline bureaucracy, that's a good thing, and that's how I looked at this. And I think, Tampa Bay Water has a great track record of acting responsibly, and so if we can deliver services quicker and easier, I'm all for it.
Vice Chair Oakley, do you have something?
Yes, sir. I also agree with the streamlining of this process. It's not doing something they probably wouldn't allow us to do anyway, but it'll streamline it to where we're able to move forward with protections in our environment and also providing water when our citizens need it. And I'm sure they'll be looking over our shoulders, and I'm sure it's the right thing to do, because anytime that you can move the process through the stream faster for government, because you can get held up with waiting on answers, even though you will get the answer, but being able to move that and streamline it is much better for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Oakley. Commissioner Smith.
Thank you. And as I expressed to the staff in the briefing, I think I agree with Commissioner Starkey that Tampa Bay Water has an excellent track record in protecting our environment. But, things change and administrations change and pendulums swing back and forth. So I will be looking very carefully when this comes back to make sure that there are that written into this permit are the conditions necessary for approving emergency withdrawals, and mitigation is spelled out so that everybody can feel very comfortable that this is streamlining, but it's not deregulating.
All right.
Mr. Chairman. Yes, Councilmember Morales.
Mr. Chairman, and I agree with everything everyone said. This is just getting ahead of the curve before the curve arrives.
Well said. Absolutely. Anybody else for input? I think, Warren, you've heard from us. Go forth and keep us posted, and look forward to more information later in the year.
Thank you.
We move on. I don't see anything for under our finance. Is that so? Is that true? Okay, nothing there. Moving into the old business and other administrative matters. Anything from any of the members? Anything from Matt? Matt, anything else?
No, sir, not under administrative matters.
Okay. I would just, a couple things real quickly. There has been a lot of conversation about the water shortage, and I would just say that the message is that we're planning for those eventualities when they come. And so I think good communication, good planning is great. Calmness needs to prevail. I know there'll be a lot of communication going out to our residents to please watch how you use the water that we have right now as we have this shortage. So, but otherwise, everything is going well. The availability is there, and we are providing water as planned. In our June meeting, I just wanted to call attention to two things. One, I mentioned earlier about the dashboard. Take a look at that again. I'd like to have a little conversation about that. And also take a look at that management plan that was supposed to be discussed today, will be discussed in June, at least that's the plan. It's a really, really good independent self-evaluation of how we have done over the last 5 years. And I do think we need to spend some time on that to kind of, you know, some of the good and not so good, but overall very good performance. But we just need to dive into that a little bit. So look forward to that conversation. And again, finally, what came up under the budget part on some of those service expense increases and how that's reconciled by our staff. Anything else on that before we finish up? Yes, Commissioner Starkey, did you have something?
I'm not sure if I'm at the right place, but I wanted to say that if you have any kind of public service announcement, like a PDF or a JPEG or something I can put in my newsletter, I'm pushing one out every day. I'm happy to put in some information about being mindful of the water shortage. So I'm out here at my house on the water, and it is nasty outside. I got white cap, lightning, really raining, so we're getting some water now. But I'd be happy to push that out through my social media platform.
Thank you for that weather report. I hope it's happening over at our some of our other places too. Yes, Matt.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And under the performance audit, that was covered under G1, and I did fail to mention that, so I appreciate you bringing that up. And indeed, we anticipate that coming to the board in June. And just to let the board know that management will be developed. We certainly look at those things and any opportunities for improvement, and we will be putting together a response plan or some way to address any of those initiatives, suggestions, and we'll be bringing that back to the board in the following board meeting in August. And the only thing left on the agenda, Mr. Chair, is a motion for receive and file.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
I'll make that motion. Second.
Charlie had the motion and Commissioner Merman the second. And I guess, can we just do a all in favor, say aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries unanimously, and seeing nothing else for the good of the order, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much and stay safe.
Thank you.